So welcome. I'm just so excited to see all of you today. We had over 280 people respond for this event. It's very exciting. And we're very honored today to have Steve Zeit. Steve is a muscle rehabilitation specialist. He's with the Center for Muscle Therapy and Skin Health. And I could do an hour-long commercial for Steve because he has helped my body enormously. And, big welcome, Steve.
Testing, can you hear me all? Is it coming through? I'll move it up a little higher here. There we go. Hopefully that's good. Hi, my name is Steve, and I am old enough to ride a ride today. I just turned 50 this year, so I can join you, although I haven't officially joined Osher yet. It's a pleasure to be here. I spoke a couple of years ago at another Osher event. I believe it was a Wednesday luncheon. What do we call those? Right, lunch and learn. There we go. And what I'm going to be talking about today is going to be very similar. So if you were at that event, you're going to hear a lot of the same things. I am a muscle therapist. What that means is, in the state of Utah, I'm licensed as a massage therapist. Unfortunately, in the state of Utah, being licensed as a massage therapist covers a wide range of things. If anybody's been to different types of massage therapy before, some people lay their hands on you and sing. Other people do deep muscle work, which is what I do. I was trained in Chicago, and my wife and I have lived here for 13 years now. And we have a practice near downtown, which is how I met Kathy and some other people, other Osher members. And I'm here basically to talk to you today about muscle pain. So, if you're like me, I woke up this morning and I had a little bit of muscle pain. Anybody else? Yes, good. Yeah, if you didn't wake up with muscle pain today, I suppose you would just leave right now. We're okay with that. We're jealous of you. So, before we start talking about muscle pain, I want to just talk about pain in general. And pain, and I can say this now, pain in our demographic, 50 and older, there is a lot of it. And yes, there are pains that come from disease. And for those things, you go to your doctor, you go to your specialist, and those are helped in many cases with meds, etc., physical therapy, rehab, if you have an injury, etc., etc. But there are many people that suffer from pain that seems to be unexplained. And we just assume, as we get older, that that's just what comes with territory. My dad is just turned 80 this year, and he's very active. In fact, he was out on a bike ride with a group of people about 2 weeks ago, and unfortunately a dog ran in front of somebody's bike and he crashed and broke his collarbone. His first broken bone at 80. I have not broken a bone yet, so I'm still knocking on wood. I told him if I could get to 80, that would be great. I don't really want to do it that way, though. But my dad always told me as I was growing up, and he was having aches and pains, and being the surgeon that he was, and the field that he was in, that's just what happens. You get older, you have pain. The good news that I have to tell you is that's not necessarily true. Okay? And specifically when it comes to muscle pain, that's absolutely 100% not true. If you have muscle pain and you can determine that what you have is muscle pain, and that's always a hard thing, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, to figure out, is it muscles, is it something else, is it nerves, is it disease generated, etc. But if you can figure out that it's muscles, I'm here to tell you the good news that it can be 100% cured. Muscles don't have a choice. If you do the right thing to a muscle, it's going to change. It's going to get looser, and in most cases, well, in every case, you'll be able to eliminate the pain. When I say muscles, I'm kind of using that in a general term, because what I really mean is soft tissue. Soft tissue in the body includes muscles, tendons, and ligaments. And tendons and ligaments are the same thing. Tendons just connect muscle to bone. Ligaments connect bone to bone. Same material, same thing. So, tendons, ligaments, scar tissue, which is a type of connective tissue, and then all the types of different connective tissue. And the main thing we deal with is called fascia. If you buy chicken at the store, if you're a meat eater, and you take the skin off, there's always that slimy stuff between the skin and the meat. That's what fascia is. Okay? And we have it in our bodies and we need to replace it. Okay? So, the first thing I want to say is that we can deal with muscle pain, and we can deal with it effectively if you know what to do. And part of what I'm going to tell you about today is how to do that on yourself. Because you can come see me, and you can pay me for therapy, but you can also do a lot of it on your own. You can save yourself a lot of time and money. And I'm busy enough, actually, so I actually don't need more clients. So I have enough people to work with anyway. Before we go specifically talking about muscles, I want to talk a little bit about, like I said, our demographic in terms of pain and what people suffer. It's been estimated that over 75% of the people in our demographic suffer from some sort of pain. And the crazy thing about chronic pain, studies have shown that chronic pain centers in a different part of the brain than acute pain does. Unfortunately, chronic pain centers in the emotional center of the brain, which makes us become what? Yeah, cranky, that's good. Depressed, probably is another good word. Okay? Do we have chronic pain sufferers here? You'd like to raise your hand and admit it. Yeah, okay. Got it. So those of you who have experienced chronic pain that you've had for a long time, that seems to have no answer, that nobody can figure out what's going on, and you just wake up every day thinking, how am I going to deal with this? I always have incredible admiration for those people, because the amount of suffering they go through every day just to live, and they talk to you, and they carry on conversations, and they smile, they have families, and they have jobs, and all that, and they do this all. Feel free to come in, no problem. They do this all while they're suffering from an immense amount of pain. So yes, chronic pain literally causes depression. Literally does, because it triggers in the emotional center of the brain, unfortunately. The other thing that I also want to be clear is that pain isn't normal. Okay, some of us think that I was talking about this earlier, that pain just is something that's assumed as we get older. And with muscles, it's not the case. And basically the reason for that is, as we use muscles, actually, as we use them, or if we're inactive on a couch potato and don't use them, but one of the things that naturally happens to muscles is muscles get tighter. And so, as we get older and we've used our muscles more and more, 30 years of muscle use is a little bit less use than 50 or 70 years of muscle use. And we just assume that it has to do with the fact that the muscle's getting old, because we're getting old, but it's really not. Because a muscle at 20 is almost the same exact muscle at 80. You've seen people run marathons, do Ironmans at 80, right? Lou Hollander, I do triathlon, it's kind of my newest passion. I've done a couple half Ironmans. I aspire to an Ironman someday. It's on the bucket list. We'll see if I get there, I don't know. But I was at the World Championships for the Ironman event almost a year ago in Hawaii, and saw Lou Hollander, who turned 80, finish his 19th Ironman, I think. And he broke, he took an hour off his time from the year before. So it can be done, and literally what he goes around doing, he's retired, he goes around talking to people about how he does it. And he talks a lot about nutrition, and a lot about, keeping your muscles loose, and exercise and activity, etc., etc. But the great thing is, if you take care of yourself, you can keep going, and your muscles will keep functioning. So if you know that a muscle functions about as well at 70 as at 20, and yours aren't, then there's a reason for it. And that's what we're going to be talking about today in terms of explaining. The other things I want to touch on before, and we can come back if we need to. I usually tend to run out of time because I can pretty much talk forever about muscles. But the other thing I want to talk about is a few little things, and we'll come back to this later, is one, being active, because this kind of predicates muscle, right? If you're active, and you can stay active, huge difference in terms of your quality of life. I'm sure many of you know somebody in your life, a friend of a relative who had some sort of catastrophic injury at somewhere between 60 and 65, and their health just went, just deteriorated, okay? Because they had some injury and they couldn't stay active. I know a couple people like that who fell, broke a hip, suddenly their quality of life and their energy and everything, general health, level of pain just, dove, because they aren't able to stay active. The fascinating thing, most of you probably know this, anybody here have joint replacement? Oh, Wow, cool. Knees? Yes, okay. My mom got a new knee about 6 years ago. 20 years ago, when you got a new knee, what did they do? It's like a cast on your back. Now, for those of you that have new knees, you know, within 6 hours of a new knee, what are you doing? Pedaling a bike, right? Or they have you on a machine that's like an emotional bike. So what's changed in rehab medicine in the last 20 years is all about movement. Everybody in rehab medicine wants to get you moving, okay? That's what physical therapy is about. If you have pain, you can't move, let's get you moving. Let's try to find a way to get you moving. And that's a huge part of life and keeping going. So let's see a show of hands of those people that are active here. Hopefully it's everybody, yes? Good, that's what we like to see. You're reading the newspapers and you're catching the enthusiasm. Good. And when I say active, we consider a 20-minute walk 3 times a week active. Perfect. Okay? 20-minute walk 3 times a week active. You can do some strength training, we love that. You can do some stretching, a little bit of yoga, a little bit of Pilates, something fun that you enjoy, whatever, that's great. But let's just assume that's the minimum. Anything beyond that, great. Okay? It's just extra in terms of movement. So activity is huge. So let's just assume we're going to stay active. The one thing that, of course, can stop us is pain, which is what we're going to talk about today, and how to prevent that. The other thing I want to talk a little bit about is nutrition. And I'm not going to go into specifics. I'm not a nutritionist. This is all anecdotal for me, because as I've gotten older, I've thought, I got to figure out ways to stay healthy. I got to figure out ways to stay active. And there's some things that I've read, people I've come across, and nutritionists that I've talked to, and things that I've tried that I think are beneficial. I'm just going to mention a couple of them, in case you're not doing them. First thing I want to talk about is fish oil. You've all heard of fish oil, yes? High-grade pharmaceutical fish oil. We can all buy it now. 10, 15 years ago, a little harder to buy, but the quality is great. Without a doubt, if there's one thing you're going to do, take fish oil. The studies that have been done on decreasing inflammation in the body are astounding. And without giving too much information or being too crude, you take as much fish oil as you can without really messing up your digestive tract. How's that sound? Okay? Because if you take too much fish oil, yes, you do get diarrhea, sorry, but that's just what happens. So you take as much as you can without having that happen. Okay? That's the rule of thumb. And you want, obviously, high quality. There are some studies currently that are being done, National Institute of Health, about inflammation. And there are some scientists that are hypothesizing that most of the diseases that we deal with are inflammation-based. So, if we can do something to decrease inflammation, which is fish oil, great, let's do it. And it's good for us, there's no side effects, etc., except what we talked about, which you can manage, of course, by not taking too much of it. Okay, so fish oil is huge. I also want to talk about food. Food's a drug. If you weren't aware of it, it affects your body like drugs do. Any of you ever woke up in the morning, or say it's mid-afternoon, you're at work, you're thinking about lunch, and you decide, I want to have a bagel and some orange juice and a banana. And about 20 minutes later, you're ready to sleep. You crash, okay? It's because those things are pretty much all carbohydrates. And the problem with carbohydrates is, what does it do to your body? Raises your blood sugar. What does your body then do? It uses insulin. Your body has to regulate the blood sugar in your body. And of course, the insulin response is where you get that kind of, I'm ready to fall asleep. So, food is a drug. The ratios of proteins and carbohydrates and fat all affect how we feel. Any of you ever heard of the zone diet? Okay? The whole zone diet is based on a ratio of carbohydrates to protein to fat. And if you eat this right ratio, then your body responds better. I've tried it, I love it, and it's great. It's kind of hard to eat that way because you're measuring everything and how much protein, carbs, and everything do I have. So it can be a little complicated, but for me, it works pretty well, and I just kind of guesstimate things. But one thing I do want to say is most of us, as we get older, and even when we're younger, we don't get enough protein in our diets. So from a food standpoint, let me explain how protein works too. So we can break down proteins into, let's use dairy, egg whites, soy, that little group of proteins. The body absorbs about 20% of that. Okay? So think of all of those things that you eat in a day, take 20% of that, of those things, that's what your body's getting in protein. Meat, about 40 to 45%. So even if you're a meat eater, you're getting less than half the protein that's in the protein you're eating. Because your body just takes the rest of it and eliminates it. Eggs are the best. The great thing about it is we used to think eggs don't eat eggs like cholesterol. We now know that dietary cholesterol is different than the cholesterol produced in our bodies. So eat away eggs, okay? They're great. I actually eat about half a dozen eggs a day. That's kind of my minimum, okay? So think an egg is, okay, and you only absorb 50% of an egg in the protein. So let's say 6 eggs, that's 36 grams of protein, right? Half of that is my body absorbs. In the 6 eggs, I'm only getting 18 grams of protein. So it's not a lot. So people sometimes do whey protein, they do drink protein drinks and all that. And that's great, you should, but I just want to encourage you, just get more protein, okay? Fish oil, get more protein. Okay, 2 big things. The other thing I want to mention is something called resveratrol. Everybody heard of resveratrol? It's the substance that everybody thinks makes red wine really great for you. Okay? So you don't really need to drink red wine to get it, you just take resveratrol. And it's supposed to help in terms of reducing some of the aging. It's a great cardiovascular benefit. I'm just going to throw it out there as another possibility.
Spell that.
resveratrol. Resveratrol. Or if you'd like to drink red wine, go for it. Happy with that too. And to prove, yes. Yes. In fact, that's a very good question. And the question is, with my eggs, do I eat the yolks? Egg whites are only absorbed about 20%. Full eggs, 50%. And unfortunately, yes, egg yolks do have saturated fats in them, which we know creates cholesterol. If you have high cholesterol, you may have to do some egg whites. That's a very good question. And by the way, let me just say here, I know there's going to be a period of questions at the end, but if you do have questions while I'm talking, feel free to raise your hand. I kind of like a little bit of interaction. If you feel you can wait to the end, that's great. But if you're missing something or not quite sure you heard something, feel free to ask. If you have a question. Do I recommend? Oh, you know, the rule of thumb is you take the mean body mass. So you take what you weigh, and you figure out how much fat you have, there's your percentage, and you have a mean body mass. So for me, I don't care about, weight. I weigh about 160 pounds. My lean body mass is about 136 pounds, 140 pounds. And they say that if you're really, really active, like a professional athlete, your grams of protein should equal your lean body mass. That would be 140 grams of protein for me. I'm not an elite athlete, but that's a huge amount. So if you're exercising a lot, you need more protein. Okay, I said resveratrol and prove I can. Question in the back.
What about flax oil instead of fish oil?
Yeah, flax oil is good. One of the problems is in terms of absorption. We have the omega-3s and the omega-6s, and flax oil tends to be high on the omega-6s, not as high on the omega-3s. And if you can't take fish oil for some reason, you're allergic to fish in some way, flax oil is a substitute. But all the studies that have been done kind of show that fish oil is better if you can do it. Yes?
Does red grape juice act the same as red wine?
Yes, it does. Yeah, red grape juice acts the same as red wine. Yes, it does. The problem is that the resveratrol in red grape juice or red wine is pretty minimal. So if you really want to get resveratrol, it's best to just buy resveratrol. You can just get it at Whole Foods or whatever. A lot of people carry it. Yes?
My understanding from one of my doctors was take pearl oil instead of fish oil, because fish oil has
Yes, the question was about krill oil versus fish oil. You can definitely take krill oil. It's a good substitute. It's equal. There are some questions about mercury in fish oil. It all depends on the quality of your body. We would consider high-grade pharmaceutical fish oil is purified, and there's minimal. You don't have to worry about mercury and those things. If you're buying something at the grocery store and it's kind of a low quality, yeah, you might be a little more concerned. That's a good question. Okay, now I have to look without my glasses here because I'm 50 years old and need bifocals. Let's see. Oh, vitamin D. Vitamin D is another huge one. And the reason vitamin D is huge is because they say that anywhere below, is it south of the latitude of Key West, any place north of that in the wintertime, you're pretty much getting 0 vitamin D from the sun. I think that's what it was. So, 'cause that's where we get a lot of our vitamin D, unless you're drinking milk that has vitamin D in it. But, what is it? A couple years ago, the Food and Drug Administration said 400 IUs of vitamin D was necessary. They bumped up to 1,500 recently. So, and for those of you that are affected by seasonal affective disorder, sad. Winter comes around, you get bummed out, you get blues. Not enough sun. My wife's that way. She used to go to Hawaii in the wintertime. It's a good excuse. I need to go to Hawaii too. But vitamin D can help in that stuff. Okay, so a little sidebar, nutrition, those are just some things. But for me, those are things that I think are really beneficial. But let's get to the meat of what we're talking about today in terms of muscles. So we've already established that muscles change as we age. Let's also establish that nothing is ever permanent with soft tissue. No matter how bad it gets, it can always be changed. Okay? Even scar tissue. I had a client who worked a number of years ago who was a young child who was burned severely. Somebody spilled some boiling hot water on her shoulder. She had a huge scar. She had a bunch of surgeries. And she had a lot of restricted range of motion and just assumed that was her life. And didn't realize that you can actually make scar tissue more elastic. Fascinatingly enough. So I showed her what to do. She did a lot of it. Pretty much got all the range of motion around her back. Okay? So anything soft tissue, again, we're talking about muscles, connective tissue, which includes scar tissue, ligaments and tendons, all those things can be changed. So let's talk about pain now specifically in terms of muscles. If we think of pain on a continuum from 0 to 10, 0 is as loose as you can be, and 10 is as tight as you can be. And we start out, hopefully, at birth at 0. Maybe that's not the case, but we hope that. You know, in your teenage years, you have a few little things that happen, and you start getting tighter. And you're active in your 20s, you decide you want to go run some marathons, and you get tighter. And you have a desk job, and you sit all day at a computer, and you get tighter, and tighter, and tighter. At some point, you're going to get tight enough, you're going to have pain. Okay? Okay, so let's guess, from 0 to 10, what number do we think? As we're getting closer to 10, what number do we think pain starts at? If you know the answer, don't say. If you're guessing, you can guess. Anybody? 7? 4. I have a 5 here. Okay. 8, 2, 0. Okay, so it actually is around 7. So by the time you have pain, you're pretty tight. It's not like it started, it's not like you're getting tighter and at 2 you have pain and then your body says, oh yeah, I'm in pain, you should get me loose. No. You get tighter, 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 and keep getting tight, clueless, and you get tighter and tighter, and then all of a sudden at 7, you wake up one morning and your neck hurts and you go, where'd that come from? And it's because you were at 6.9 when you went to bed and you woke up at 7.1. And it's because you slept on your stomach instead of your side, and used a big pillow instead of a little pillow or something, Or maybe you ate something for dinner that night and you didn't sleep really well, and you're restless and you're whatever. But the point is, just when you cross that pain line, what we call the pain line at 7, you have pain. And it can be a lot of different things. So for many people, that explains why it's unexplained. Because you were getting tighter, you just didn't know it, and you crossed the pain line. Okay? Now that you understand that, now you can see why many things that cause us pain, we go, well, I don't know why, but suddenly I woke up today and my low back hurts. Now, there are times when you're picking something up, and you don't do it correctly, and you wake up the next morning and you have pain, you go, I know what I did. I lifted that refrigerator with my friend. Okay? Hopefully at our age, you're not lifting refrigerators anymore. I actually don't help friends move anymore. I just can't afford to mess up my body, so I'll help them pay somebody to hire, to move. Okay, so we have the pain line, we understand pain. Let's talk about tightness in terms of muscles and how it works. So muscles get tight, and muscles get tight from many things. We like to call it neurological tightness, because literally it's a signal from the brain telling the muscle not to let go. The brain says to the muscle, don't let go, don't let go, don't let go. So part of it is you have to understand how muscles work. So when a muscle's at rest, you're not using it, ideally it's relaxed. Ideally. Then the brain tells the muscle, or you tell the brain, or in some way, you want the muscle to contract. So there's like a split second where the muscle goes from relaxed to ready, set, and then it contracts. Okay? So we got to remember that ready, set thing. That's really important. But it's a split second. You're not aware of it. So if I'm relaxing my arm, and for some reason I want to pick up my arm this way, my brain has to tell my bicep muscles to contract. Okay? And in that contraction process, right before it contracted, there was a ready, set moment. So when a muscle isn't letting go, and it's tight, what we call neurologically tight, the muscle stays in that ready, set mode instead of going all the way back to relaxation. So, the muscle's relaxed, ready, set, it contracts. Ideally, it goes back to relax. But when a muscle's tight, it stays in ready, set. Question?
So those are the voluntary muscles?
Those are the voluntary muscles. But the ready, set is an involuntary response. You can't control it. You can meditate, you can breathe, you can take muscle relaxants, you can ice, you can heat, you can stretch, you can do yoga. All that stuff is not going to change the fact that the brain is telling the muscle to protect you in some way. The technical term for that in the medical world, often they call it splinting. You know, you have pain somewhere, the muscle gets a certain amount of tightness, and now all of a sudden the muscles protect you, and they don't want to let go. Anybody here had whiplash before? Hopefully not too many of you. Okay? Same thing happens. You get a little fender bender, somebody bumps you from the back, your neck whips a little bit, you kind of go, yeah, it's not too bad. You wake up the next morning, you think you're fine. Okay? Guess what happened during that little whiplash? The muscles tightened up, and now after over a couple days, guess what's going to happen? In about 2 or 3 weeks, you're going to start having muscle pain. Okay? Because the brain is telling those muscles, don't let go, don't let go, don't let go, don't let go. We call that the reflex arc. Some people call it the feedback loop, but it's a basically involuntary brain response. So, muscles get tight, they're not letting go. What that feels like, which I'm sure all of you can feel, is you reach back in your shoulders and you press on your shoulders, you can feel some hardness, right? Ideally, when a muscle's not contracting, you should be able to push into it, and it should be very, very soft. Okay? Young people like to think about having a toned body. Actually, when you're relaxed, you don't want your body to be toned. You want it to be relaxed. So when a muscle is tight and not letting go, it literally feels like a rubber tire. You push into it, pushing your muscles in your back. Oops. Sorry about that. Might have been my watch. Can you still hear me? Yes? Or you push in the muscle in your neck, okay, your low back, your hips, etc. When a muscle's not letting go, it feels very rubbery and very hard. Okay? So what we want to do to fix that, because it's very fixable, is we want to block the signal from the brain. And instead of doing it internally, we're going to do it, because you really can't, we're going to do it externally. So what we're going to do is we're going to press on the muscle, it's not letting go, and we're going to press pretty hard. It's not going to be pleasant, unfortunately. Actually, to some people it feels good. Somebody like me, it feels great. Not to everybody, but it can be intense. We want to use enough pressure that we're literally going to block that signal from the brain. And as we block the signal from the brain, the muscle lets go. Okay? We call this sustained compression. So, if you have a tight spot in your neck, best thing to do, and we all do this, right? Your neck hurts, what do? You stick your finger back there and you poke into it, right? You go, oh, my neck hurts a little bit. So intuitively, we tend to do that. Or we stick our hands back here. Here we go. And we rub our shoulders a little bit, stick our fingers into it. So we intuitively know how to do that. But the key is doing it for a longer period of time and finding ways to do it to yourself. We're talking about self-therapy. I have a nice little tool here. It's called a back knobber. And we sell, I don't know how many hundreds of these we sell a year. You can get them online if you want to check this out afterwards. Please feel free to, but don't steal mine. Thank you very much. So literally, you just hook this over your shoulder, and you can see I can work on all spots of my shoulder. Great little tool. The guy who invented this started by using an umbrella, a little hook of an umbrella. And he was driving his car and his neck hurt, and he took his umbrella, and he hooked it over his shoulder, and he thought, that feels pretty good. So he started doing some research on muscles and trigger points and found that, sustaining compression gets him to let go. I'm going to build something and sell it. And he's obviously done very well because we alone sell many of them. The reason we sell this one, actually, the reason I like this one is it actually comes apart. I stick it in my bag. You know, I travel with this when I travel. I never go anywhere without it. In fact, my wife and I have two in our house, one upstairs and one downstairs, so we don't fight about who's going to get which one. Okay, so we have ways that we can get in there. You can also go to somebody who does specific muscle work and work on your muscles. The problem with sustained compression is that once we get the muscle, we press into the muscle and we get it to let go, if we start using the muscle again, guess what happens? It refires up because of muscle memory. Okay? Anybody here play a musical instrument? Okay. Or do a sport that requires a skill? Like, cycling doesn't really require skill, but basketball does. Shooting a basketball. So the great thing about playing a musical instrument or sport is that we have muscle memory. If I play the violin, every day that I wake up, I don't have to relearn how to play the violin. My muscles know where to go. Muscle memory. So muscle memory is great when it comes to skills, but it's kind of unfortunate when it comes to muscle tightness. Because muscles remember being tight. So we have to remind muscles to let go. So the sustained compression we're talking about, it's not just a one-shot deal. It's not like, I think I'll stick my finger in my shoulder and in 10 minutes it'll be gone forever. It doesn't work that way. You gotta stick something in your shoulder probably every day for a long time and maybe for the rest of your life. Okay? To keep it that way once it gets loose. So sustained compression works, but it works over a period of time, and we keep doing it, and we keep doing it, and we keep doing it. Any questions about sustained compression? It's really simple. Okay? Oh, it's called the back knobber. Back knobber. K-N-O-B-B-E-R. It's sold by the Pressure Positive Company. There's an 800 number on here I can give you too if you like. 1-800-603-5107. They actually sell a bunch of other tools too, which are great. Actually, I can use it in your shoulders. I use we'll talk about this. I use tennis balls a lot, like on your hips and low back. Lay on the floor, take a tennis ball, stick it underneath your hip or your low back. One of the best things to do with your spine is take 2 tennis balls, stick it in the sock, an old sock, tie it down so there's a little knot there. Lay on your back with your knees bent, stick it right underneath your spine. You have 1 tennis ball on each side of your spine. You just hang out there, lay there, allow the pressure to let your low back muscles relax. So tennis balls are great. The other thing about tennis balls, you see your question here, just 1 second. The one thing to remember about tennis balls is they get old, so they get soft. So you keep about every 6 months, you need to kind of rejuvenate them by new ones, and then give your friends all the old ones so they can use them. Okay, question?
How do you know how long to keep the compression on the muscle?
Good question. How do you know how long to keep the compression on? So what it feels like, if I was to do compression on you, as I was pressing into the muscle, at some point, it gets too intense. That's too much. We don't want that. But until that point, at some point the muscle pushes back at you. That's too much. We back off a little bit from that and then we wait. And what it's going to feel like is if I'm pressing into a muscle, your muscle, it's going to feel really intense. And then I'm going to just hold that same exact pressure. As the muscle lets go, suddenly what you're going to feel is as the muscle lets go, you're going to feel that the intensity is diminishing. So when you stick something on your shoulder or back, and you find a spot that really hurts, and you hang out there, like right there for me. You hang out there, and you wait, and you wait. And you might have to wait a little bit more. It might happen in 5 seconds, it might happen in 2 minutes, but at some point you kind of go, oh, that's not so bad anymore. That means the muscle is let go. So basically, it's a change in sensation. Okay? And then you can either go deeper, or you can find a new spot. Because there's always new spots. Okay? You don't ever have to worry about that. Question? Yes, we're going to talk about trigger points in a minute. Okay, yeah, I haven't talked about that yet. Okay, so we have sustained compression. And then one of the reasons it's sustained is if you press into a muscle and you move, it hurts more. Like you can do that on your forearm. Pressing your forearm as hard as you can tolerate without any movement. And now start moving. Ouch. Hurts more. Okay? Traditional deep tissue massage had a lot of pressure, a lot of movement. You feel kind of beat up. You feel like, ooh, that hurts, that hurts, ooh, it's just too much. Sustained compression allows you to go deep with less intensity. So the idea is don't move, don't get on the tennis ball and roll around. Okay? Just find a spot that's tender, hang out, go let go. Okay? So, the good thing is we just solved muscle tightness. Okay? Actually, you probably know more than most people in the medical profession about muscles. Seriously. One of the unfortunate things that happens in the medical world is that there isn't that much training about muscles. A physician who was actually President Kennedy's physician, Janet Travell was her name. She pioneered the work in trigger point therapy. And she has a 2-volume set, which I should have brought today, but I forgot. She has a 2-volume medical textbook set about trigger points, explains what they are. She was the one that got him walking, literally. When he was a senator, you remember when he was a senator? Crippled, hardly could stand up and walk. She was the one with trigger point therapy that got him walking again. And when he got to the White House, he said, "You're coming with me." Okay? So her claim to fame was obviously the White House, being a physician there. But in the medical world, trigger point therapy was what she really pioneered. Her goal was to get trigger point therapy taught in medical schools, and she did that until she died in, I think, 1993. She was in her 80s, late 80s. But it never took on. She was always very frustrated with that. So most of the training that doctors get is a week in medical school. They learn all the muscles. They learn how they work a little bit, where they attach to. They take their little test and says, okay, I'm done with the muscles. Boom, going on. Now, if you're an orthopedic surgeon, I have a friend that's an orthopedic surgeon. He does knees and shoulders. Yes, he knows all the muscles on the knees and shoulders. But you ask him about the hip, he's clueless. And he doesn't really understand how muscles work in terms of contraction and pain. He just understands where they attach and what he has to cut, what he has to fix, and et cetera, et cetera. So there isn't a lot of understanding. So when you go to your doctor and you have muscle pain, your doctor's kind of going to go, "Sorry, you're getting old." Okay? Which we know isn't true. Well, you're aging. We accept we age, right? But being old is in your mind, which we don't want to do. Okay? So we're aging, yes, but that's a lot of the response you're going to get. So in terms of fixing muscles, yes, question?
Does this therapy work on someone who perhaps has MFS?
Has what?
Fibromyalgia?
It can work. Fibromyalgia is a little bit of a different, kind of an odd thing. I'll just do a little sidebar on fibromyalgia because probably most of you know somebody that's been diagnosed with it. The problem is it's so generic of a term. Fibromyalgia, meaning fiber and muscle pain. The name of it is simply just what you feel. So it doesn't really say what it is or where it comes from. There is a diagnosis. You know, if you have this, and you have this, you have this, and this, then we think, okay, maybe you have fibromyalgia. What we know is people that have chronic pain, and a lot of chronic pain comes from muscles. I've had a lot of clients diagnosed with fibromyalgia, and they're simply got tight muscles, and they have trigger points. And if we eliminate those, the pain goes away, and they go, oh, I guess I didn't have fibromyalgia. Some people do actually have a systemic thing in their body where they have this chronic muscle pain that muscle work doesn't seem to help, or different types of muscle work. Some people respond to very deep, some people respond to very light. It can be a lot of different things, but it's always good to try and see what works if you have fibromyalgia. But just because the doctor says you have it, don't necessarily think that you do. Okay? Especially as you start understanding muscles a little bit better. Okay, so what causes muscles to become tight? We talked about use, trauma. You're on your mountain bike. I'm assuming some of you are on your mountain bike, yes? You're on your road bike. You're doing something, and you fall. Okay? Impact to your body. What do your muscles do? Tighten up to protect. When you have a joint that has limited range of motion, the muscles get tighter. Okay? If you have joint disease, guess what? Your muscles are going to be tighter on that joint. Sometimes the pain isn't from the joint disease, it's from the muscle tightness. It happens to a lot of people with disc problems in their low back. When you have lumbar spine problems, you have disc problems. Guess what happens when you have disc dysfunction? You have a series of muscles around your spine called the paraspinal muscles that get so tight. Anybody seen the little rubber toy that looks like a donut that dogs play with? That's kind of what happens to your paraspinal muscles. Is your muscles get so tight around your spine to protect your spine because of the disc problem And studies have shown that a huge portion of the pain people feel isn't really the fact that their disc is causing pain, it's the muscle tightness from the disc. I can't fix your disc, but I can definitely help you with the muscle pain. So it's something to look into in terms of muscle pain. So trauma, we know that joint issues. The other thing that's fascinating about muscle is when you put a muscle in a shortened position, it gets tight. Okay? So all of you are sitting, most of you are sitting. When you're sitting in this position, with your leg like this, guess what you're shortening? You're shortening your hip flexor, which is here, and you're shortening your hamstring, which is here. Because your leg is really designed to be straight. So if you sit a lot, there's two muscles that you're shortening all the time, which are eventually going to get tight. If you drive a taxi for a living, or if you're a truck driver, or if you sit at a desk all day, guess what two muscles are always going to be tight on you? Your iliopsoas and your hamstrings. And guess what? One attaches to the front of your pelvis, the other to the back of your pelvis. When one gets tight, it tilts you one way, and the other gets tight, it says, no you don't, it tilts you the other way, and you get this little tug of war going on between these two muscles. And they fight against each other, they get tighter and tighter and tighter. Okay? So just sitting, yes, and this gentleman just stretched out his legs in front of him, which is exactly what you should do every once in a while when you're sitting. If you sit for long periods of time, don't sit like this all the time. Let your legs stretch out in front of you. Stand up a little bit. Okay? So that's neurological tightness, or what we call muscle tightness. Any questions about any of that? It's not very complicated. You literally press into the muscle, get it to let go. Okay? The other two things we want to deal with are something called trigger points and something called adhesions. Okay? An adhesion simply is a knot in your muscles. And adhesions have a huge implication in terms of muscle tightness and especially weakness. Because as we get older, we get weaker, right? We think, wow, I'm not as strong as I was when I was 20. A lot of that has to do with knots in your muscles. So, let's talk about fascia. Fascia is the connective tissue that's in our body that acts like a solid lubricant. Remember the example I gave of the chicken and the skin? Taking the skin off a chicken, that slimy stuff between the skin and the meat. That's in our bodies too. And it's between everything in our bodies. It's why everything can slide against everything else. It's the reason your skin can slide against the tissue underneath, because there's fascia there. It's between all your internal organs. Between your ribs and your lungs. That's why your lungs can slide against your rib cage. So it's everywhere in our body and wraps around all your muscles. But the most important thing for us, as with muscles, is that not only does it wrap around the muscle, but it wraps around every single muscle fiber. That's why the fibers can slide against each other when the muscle contracts. So, what happens, and again, this is just what a muscle does, as you contract the muscle over and over and over again, let's say by the time you're 8, you've had 30,000 muscle contractions, and by the time you're 20, you've had 3 million muscle contractions, and by the time you're our age, who knows how many muscle contractions you've had? That fascia in between the muscle fibers literally dehydrates. It loses fluid. You can't change that. It's just what a muscle does. As it loses fluid, guess what? It gets stickier. Once it loses enough fluid, it literally turns into glue. And now what happens to your muscle fibers? They stick together. Okay? Again, you reach into your shoulder and neck and you feel what? A knot. That is a group of muscle fibers. They're all stuck together. We call that technically an adhesion in your muscle fibers. Okay? Once it's stuck together, there's a couple problems with that. One, your brain doesn't even know it's there. There's no mechanism in your body to tell your brain that your neck has a knot in it. It has no clue. Secondarily, and more importantly, there is no mechanism for the brain, even if it knew it was there, for the brain to say, okay, body, let's fix the knot. There's no mechanism for it in the body. It doesn't exist. So you get a knot, and guess what? You got it for life. So all of us are walking around with a lot of knots in our muscles. Right? Okay? And I bet you, if I took one person, if I come up here on a massage table, I could probably find a knot almost anywhere in the body. Literally. Your calves, your quads, your hamstrings, your hips, your low back, your shoulders, your neck, your arms, your forearms, your hands, your thumbs. Everywhere. Okay? Where you have a muscle, and where you're using your muscles, which hopefully we're using them, you're going to have knots. Okay? So, the problem with knots is, when a muscle contracts, and the fibers overlap each other, the fibers also broadens. Okay? You can see it in a muscle. Muscle is narrow, you contract it, it gets wider. So overlapping the muscles, and there's a broadening effect. Guess what you need to have happen? The muscles are going to broaden. You need for the muscles to be able to not be stuck together. So you can imagine, you go to contract your muscle, the fibers are all stuck together in these knots. Guess what happens? No contraction. Limited contraction. Neurologists estimate that up to 30% of your strength can be lost in a muscle if you have knots in your muscles. 30%. It's huge. Question?
No. I get occasional cramps in my leg. What's happening?
A cramp can be a bunch of different things. Somebody's asking about cramps in your legs. There are different types of times when a muscle, we call it tonic contraction, when a muscle, or tonic spasm, when a muscle holds on, doesn't want to let go. In many cases, women that are pregnant, because of the increased blood volume, a lot of times it's electrolyte based. There's not enough electrolytes in your body. But there are other times when the muscle just gets so tight, it starts contracting on its own. And the sustained compression that we talked about can solve that sometimes. Or it can be an electrolyte issue, calcium, sodium chloride, potassium, those sort of things. Okay? So, you've got knots in your muscles, you're getting weaker. Sorry. The cool thing is they've done some studies and pretty much show that, and you can see it in people, like Lou Hollander, the 80-year-old who's doing Ironman. Obviously his muscles contract better than most people at 80, right? Like when you're doing an Ironman. So if we get rid of the knots in your muscles, guess what? You get your strength back. So I'm 50, and in my 20s, I raced bikes. Just like, everybody see the Tour of Utah this weekend, which was great, really fun to see. So I raced bicycles, and in my 20s even, I got really tight from all the competitive stuff I was doing, and I was having some back problems and hip problems and leg problems, and a friend of mine said, oh, you should go see my friend Flo, the muscle therapist. I went to see his friend Flo, and I was totally hooked. Because I got stronger, and I got looser, and I felt better. And a lot of it was because I had so many adhesions in my muscles from using my muscles over and over, knots in my muscles. So how do we get rid of an adhesion? Because we can get rid of an adhesion, is we do something called cross-fiber friction. Okay? We simply find the muscle, we find where the knot is, we figure out which direction the fibers go. The fibers go this way, we flip across the muscle fibers, and that separates the fibers. Cross-fiber friction. Separates the fibers. As its fibers separate, guess what? It rehydrates. Guess what? You get your strength back. Okay? Question?
Is there a rehydration
No. Nope. That's a really great question, because I hate to use the word dehydrate, because everybody assumes if I drink enough water, my muscle won't do that. Sorry, it doesn't work. And you can have fluid in your body, but it doesn't mean it's going to actually go to, in terms of the adhesions, it's not going to go to where it needs to go. But when we separate the fibers, now we have space, and then it rehydrates itself naturally. So there is no necessity there isn't anything you can do in terms of taking anything that's going to help with the hydration, it's just getting the muscle fibers separated. Okay? Friction, yes, cross-fiber friction. Yes, yeah, sustained compression, cross-fiber friction. So the other thing that's fascinating about cross-fiber friction is scar tissue. So scar tissue is a mesh of collagen fibers. So like in our tendons, all the collagen fibers go one direction, which is why a tendon is slightly pliable. That's a little gift to it. Okay? When there's scar tissue somewhere, collagen fibers are this random mesh of collagen fibers that are totally inflexible, which we need because the whole point of the scar tissue is to hold things together, right? But scar tissue creates problems in muscles when you have an injury. It could create problems in skin. If anybody has a big scar somewhere in the skin, you feel that pulling on your skin sometimes. So literally, all we do, if the fibers are all random direction, is we do cross-fiber friction on that. And the example I can use is spaghetti. You have your handful of dry spaghetti, and you're about ready to put it in the pot, you cook it, and you drop it. It goes all over the counter, it's all different directions. Of course, you could go pick up each one by one, or you can literally roll your hand on the counter. What does it do? It lines up all the spaghetti and you pick it up. Okay? Exact same thing we can do with collagen fibers and scar tissue. We go one direction like this, all the collagen fibers go, and they line up, and now they're all one direction, and now we get pliability back into scar tissue. So we can make scar tissue more elastic. So if you've had any surgery, even if it's laparoscopically, we can actually, a lot of the scar tissue on the surgery sites feel restricted or there's pain there. A lot of times, because of scar tissue, we haven't made it elastic yet. Okay? So we have muscles that don't let go, tightness, neurological tightness. We have knots in your muscles. We can get rid of both of those. And the third thing that comes, and it only happens if you have the first two. Remember this, okay? You have to have a knot, you have to have the muscle not letting go. You can develop what's called trigger points. Anybody here heard of trigger points? The term gets thrown around a lot now. Technically what a trigger point is it is a spot in the muscle that sends pain to a different location. So headaches, many headaches that people have come from trigger points in the neck. In fact, there's one muscle in your neck called your sternocleidomastoid. I'm going to grab mine right here. This muscle right in the front. Okay, you can see that when I turn this way, it pops up. It's a rotational muscle. There are 7 common trigger points in this muscle that cause pain in the head. 7, just in this one muscle alone. There's a group of muscles in the base of your skull, the back of your skull, the bone here is called your occiput. Underneath it, on both sides, we have 4 muscles called your suboccipital. The very long muscles, we just call them our suboccipital. It's easier that way. When there's trigger points in those, they cause pain above the eye, one side of the head, above the ear. So that's just an example. But any muscle can develop a trigger point. And in Janet Travell's, Dr. Travell's book, she catalogs where the common trigger points are and where they send pain. So if you have pain down in your arm, and this happens a lot, people have pain in the front of their shoulder, and they go to the doctor, and they poke around, and they go, I don't know, I can't find anything. Maybe you got bursitis. And you get to the point where you can't lift your arm. That can literally be coming from a muscle from the back of your shoulder, called your infraspinatus. And if it develops a trigger point, it can send a huge amount of pain in the front of your shoulder, and you can't even raise your shoulder. So if you work on the front of your shoulder, you're going to get nowhere. But if you know that the trigger point, and it's coming from the back, and you fix the trigger point, pain goes away. Okay? So one of the complicated things about muscle pain is the pain isn't necessarily where the pain is, which is what a trigger point is. And I would say, in my practice, 70 to 75% of the pain that I deal with people is trigger point pain, which makes it complicated because the pain isn't where somebody says the pain is. So then I got to figure it out. The great thing about Janet Travell's book is I can go look it up. And I can poke around in all the places she says to poke around. She'll say, check here, and I'll poke there, and I go, no, it's not my pain. I'll poke here, she'll say, no, it's not my pain. I hit a spot, and I go, oh, there's my pain. Pain's over here, but I'm pressing here. So with trigger point pain, we have to find the spot where the point is. The problem is we don't really know what a trigger point is. So in her book, she has a hypothesis about the fact there's a cell where the nerve meets the muscle called the motor end plate cell, and there's something going on there, blah, blah, blah. But we don't really know what it is. The cool thing is we know how to fix it, and we fix it with sustained compression. If we press on the trigger point long enough, it deactivates the pain. Okay, so now you're thinking, well, if I have pain in front of my shoulder, where do I go? How do I figure this out? Well, the good thing is there's so much on the internet now. You put trigger point, you put shoulder pain, and you Google it, and you're likely to come up with some muscles and some diagrams, and then you can start poking around and stuff and seeing if you can find your pain. You can find a muscle therapist or somebody that deals with trigger points. Question? We had a question back here. Yes?
How do you spell that doctor's name?
Travell, Travell, Janet Travell. Her book is called Myofascial Pain and Dysfunction. Janet Travell, Travell. The book is called Myofascial Pain and Dysfunction. It's 2 volumes, about $100 each. Totally worth it to get. Question over here? Yeah, okay. Come up and talk to me after if you have any questions. Yes. Cross-fiber friction? Yes. Well, the great thing about cross-fiber friction is that we don't really need to use a lot of pressure. It's not the pressure that makes a difference, it's the movement. And we can actually go really light with cross-fiber friction and still make a difference. It doesn't have to be too intense. How do you know when to use it? When you feel a knot. Okay? Everybody can feel a knot, right? You know when there's a knot in your muscle? And And when there's not, when you feel that bump, basically a knot is a bump. You shouldn't have bumps in your muscles. Question.
When you have surgery and
Yes.
the muscles are severed,
Yes.
how does that affect?
Well, very good question. When you have surgery and the muscles are cut, they always put them back together, right? But now they're put together and it heals with scar tissue. And we now have a very pliable muscle with scar tissue in it that's very inflexible, which then can cause pain for years because it's irritated, because now you have this very immovable substance in your muscle. So if we elasticize the scar tissue and make it more pliable, the pain often goes away. So it affects it hugely when you've had something sliced and put back together again. But the cool thing is we can usually mitigate that with cross-fiber pressure. Yes? When people do that, yes. Frozen shoulder, when somebody gets to the point where their muscles are so tight, yes, that's often diagnosed as frozen shoulder, and sometimes it's not really frozen, it's just really freaking tight. Which we can always fix. Any more questions? Yes? Yeah, arthritis is a problem. Yes, about arthritis. Where does arthritis fit into this? Arthritis is obviously a bone disease. Sometimes it's osteoarthritis. Just, the cartilage is worn away and you're bone on bone. The problem with arthritis is that the arthritis itself does cause pain, but so much more of the pain that people have is the muscle pain around it. Because when you have pain anywhere in your body, the muscles around that are going to tighten to protect you. So anytime you have arthritis, sure, you're going to have joint pain. But a lot of the pain that people feel is more muscle pain around the joint. There's an organization, must be 30 years ago now, I think, started, called PACE, P-A-C-E. People with arthritis can exercise. I got 5 minutes, I'm being told on my little monitor in the bed. People with arthritis can exercise. And the whole point of the program was to get people that were in pain from arthritis moving. Because if you don't move when you have arthritis, it gets worse. Even though it really sucks to have arthritis and the pain is not great, it's better to keep moving with arthritis. Question over here.
Can you tell us a little bit about the reduction in the ability to grow human muscle, diminishing of age-related testosterone?
Yeah, a question about basically muscles healing as we get older with less testosterone. Everybody has less testosterone as we get older, women and men. Women do have testosterone in their bodies. Men go through andropause, which is very gradual. Women go through menopause, which is a lot more sudden. But that diminishing of hormones, probably one of the newest fields of medicine is hormone replacement these days. And it's, I think, a very interesting field. I think when our bodies don't have, 150 years ago, age span or lifespan for men was 47? Is that right? 47 or 50? I wouldn't even be here. So when you think about that, we're living so much longer, and not necessarily our bodies were designed to go that long. So I think the question is, yes, I think it can make a difference in terms of muscle regeneration and health. And part of it is figuring out how much in terms of hormones are diminishing, and if you need replacement, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Any other questions? Yes. Say it again.
Proper length of time to stretch a muscle.
Oh, stretching muscles. Oh, wow, that you just opened a can of worms. Stretching muscles. It's so easy to overstretch a muscle. So easy. There's something called the stretch reflex. When you stretch a muscle too far, every single little muscle fiber has a cell in it called the muscle spindle cell. And it senses tension in your muscle. And when you stretch a muscle, I stretch my quad muscle to do this, at some point, my muscles in my quad go, that's too much. Sends a signal to my brain goes, oh wow, that's too much. Sends a signal back to my muscle to tell it to contract, to protect itself. So when you overstretch a muscle, you're making the muscle contract. You're getting tighter. So when you feel the stretch in a muscle, that's the muscle contraction. Most of us go to the point where we feel a stretch, and what do? We do one of two things. We hold it, or we go further. Guess what? You just made yourself tighter. So if you want to stretch and get the muscle to let go, you go to the point where you feel the stretch, and you back off. Question about when to stretch. Stretching is always...
How long?
How long?
How long?
Enough to get the sense of about 20 to 30 seconds for most stretches. Best time to stretch is after exercise. If you want to stretch, I'm not necessarily a big fan of stretching. I think it's important, but just whatever you do, don't overstretch.
When you do overstretch,
Yes.
ice or what?
Oh, yes. When you overstretch and you get sore, icing always helps. Big fan of ice. Okay, now we're getting into the other part of stretching, which is flexibility. If you need flexibility, if you're really limited in your range of motion, you need flexibility, then we just ignore the stretch reflex. We go, screw it, we don't care. We just want the muscle to get longer. And there's a technique of stretching called PNF, proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation. Sorry, long word. We just say PNF. And it's a technique designed to make muscles longer. If you do ballet, if you're a dancer, if you do martial arts, if you're a gymnast, you need a lot of flexibility. Most of us, we don't. We just need a normal, comfortable amount of flexibility. People trying to gain a lot of flexibility just for the purpose of it doesn't really do them a whole lot of good. Because you have to get pretty aggressive with muscles to actually increase your flexibility. Most of us have pretty normal flexibility. I mean, if you bending over, you can't touch your knees, you need to become more flexible. But if you can go past your knees, you're probably pretty good. Okay? I think about told I have 1 minute. Question.
How do you find out what nerves are causing muscles to go numb?
How do you find out what nerves are causing muscles to go numb?
When I sit too long, my legs go numb.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So in terms of muscles and nerves, we have an area in the front of the shoulder called your thoracic outlet area. Your nerve, the muscle that goes down your arms, called your brachial plexus, comes out of your neck, goes right in the front of your chest, front of your arm, down your arm. You have two muscles. One behind your collarbone called your scalenes. There's 3 muscles there. And you have your pectoralis minor. And those 2 muscles are very close to this nerve. And if they're tight, they'll press on the nerve and you get numbness tingling down your arm. That's your arm. The other is down the leg. The common one is the sciatic nerve. And that can be either compressed by bone in the low back or the deep muscle in your hip, in your bone, called your piriformis. And if that lays right on top of your nerve, which it does, and if it's tight, it'll press on your nerve, your feet go stiff. And again, you can look it up. Piriformis is the name of the muscle. You can look it up online and you can see the sciatic nerve right underneath it. I guess I have time for one more question. But you can always ask me afterwards. Yeah. Bruising. A bruise comes when there's a lot of pressure in the tissue, but it's fast. If you go slowly in the tissue and press really hard, it's going to hurt at some point and then you don't press hard, right? But if you go really fast in the tissue, you can't really gauge how much pressure. And that's how bruising happens. So most people don't bruise from sustained compression. If you do, you probably need something like a little more vitamin C or something in your diet. But bruising shouldn't happen with sustained compression. Okay, so thank you all. It's been a pleasure.